Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Bruce McDonald, and this is the Talamanca Review. It's Monday, the 29th of September, 8:21 p.m. Well, tonight we're going to talk about a number of things. I don't have anything super specific on my mind. I've just been remarkably lazy as of late, except the only good habit I've picked up is reading more literature and poetry. But other than that, I'm just a slug. Like it's this is crazy, man. I developed a new system for doing grant writing that leverages AI. It's not like out of the box AI. You have to plug the AI into a development environment that coders work in. For those of you who code, it's an IDE, and I'm using Visual Studio Code. And you have your AI service, and so mine is Gemini. And they give you an API key, and you configure it so that it comes in as a utility or a function, and it appears in the menu system as an icon. And then you've got a command line interface, which are about a dozen commands that are like shell commands that are specific for accessing the artificial intelligence. Now, what makes this system so unique is, and I can do it with like any grant. So I'm working with a fellow here in Costa Rica who is looking for a number of ecology grants. And I have his company's website, and then he sends me the websites of the non-governmental organizations or international bodies like the United Nations that are offering grant money for sustainable development projects. And I download his website, the whole website, and you do that with a command line interface called wget. If you work on Linux, you know this function, and it pulls the whole website down recursively. And you create like what's called a workspace or a repository, and you can back it up on GitHub, which is like cloud space for coders. And what this AI will do, the command line interface inside the IDE, is it will only work with the data it has inside that workspace. It won't go on wild goose chases. So I download the website of an organization that offers grants, and there might be like 500 pages in the website. You could probably spend a whole day. The UN one was huge. But in that website, they'll have all the principles of the company and all the requirements for the grant. And many of the requirements go with the company that is applying for the grant. So you need their website too. Or any business documents would do, a prospectus, their articles of corporation, anything. Any public-facing material about the company. And then there's an art to prompting in AI. Okay, so it's how you ask the question and what you do with the results. So you have to do it in like 7 to 10 steps. You first gather a bunch of information, then you tell the AI to export it to a text file titled this. And then what happens is those text files end up in the repository as new files. And then when you have all your preliminary work done, you just say, write an outline for the draft. And it will write the outline for the draft. Some of them are 10, 15, 20 pages. And then you can, when you select something with your mouse, like if you select like a heading, and all the questions under the heading to the next heading, You select them with your mouse, and they're blue. That becomes the specific context for the AI to focus on. So then you go back to the prompt and you say, fill out this section based on the available material in this repository, and it just writes it. I don't know what people are talking about, man, about this AI being a bad thing. I mean, it is speeding my productivity up significantly. I like working. I think that work is a very important part of life. I think there's a spiritual aspect to work. I get to be a little bit creative. Like, this is the most creative I've been with my work in a decade, 2 decades. But I'm at the top of my craft now, right? So I want to expand this business and just write grants for people. And it's a niche market. Now, you can't just use the AI. You have to be an expert writer. You have to be an excellent expert document preparer. You have to understand information architecture, like the sequence. Like, sometimes the AI will give me an outline, and I'll go, that's not the right sequence. This should be at the beginning. This should be in the middle. This should be at the end. And if you don't know those things and you're completely relying on the AI, it'll come out wrong. It's like that line in the Bible, if you don't get the leaven in the bread right, it's not going to rise. And but I'm just knocking it out of the park here. So I'll give you an example of how I use it at work. I used to have to spend hours. Like a single client could take me, like, depending on the size of the client, they could take me a week or 2 weeks to do just the interviews with the engineers. And those are done in Zoom. And then I have to transcribe all the interviews, and then I have to compare it to the documents they've given me, which could be architecture documents, functional and technical specifications, and I have to compare what they said in the interview to what's available in the material, and I have to write the application. It was laborious. Like, some clients, I had one last year. Mind you, the commission was phenomenal. It was, half a year's income for someone early or midway through their career. So the commission was worth it, and I shouldn't complain that it took me 3-4 weeks to write it, because it was like 6 months' salary for some people. But it's always a risk, right? Like, you don't know if you're going to get it. So it was very, very laborious. It's amazing what AI can do. Like, for example, take Stardust Ranch. That was all done manually. That was an unbelievably laborious book. So was Light of Darkness. Those 2 books were written by daily Skype interviews with the 2 people, one being Bob, the other being John Edmonds. Daily interviews. And then transcribing the interviews, and often manually, so play the tape for 15-20 seconds, stop it, type out what the meaningful part is. I mean, talk about labor intensive. I don't know what's going on with my dog there. But everything is just so much easier with AI now. It's just, I can see some of the problems that they're talking about, like, it's going to take, well, I think what it's going to do, like, so if you're my age and you've already mastered a trade or a craft, and I think technical writing is a trade. Hang on, I got to look into this dog here. I don't know what the hell she's barking at. I have absolutely no idea what they're doing. They know what they're doing, though. They're good dogs. Nobody comes up to my house at night unless they know me and they know my dogs. You'd have to be crazy. So I mean, I would have been. So I think the thing is, like, it's the AI is coming in, and all the people who've mastered a trade, like the manual stuff, they'll be able to take the AI and become more productive. The people starting out will not properly learn the foundations because it'll be too tempting to cheat and use AI. So I think there will be a partial corruption in the development of abilities and skills and trades. And I can see where an over-reliance on AI might develop and could very well be problematic in the long run. I can see that. It's not lost on me. But as a 59-year-old technical writer who's focusing on grant writing now on consignment, man, I could not be happier. I had a meeting with my boss today, explained to him everything I'm doing. And we were contracting with an AI company, and they were going in and doing a proprietary data extraction and running it through this whole system of algorithms they created to create a JSON file that was the potential basis for a shred claim. And the first time they did this, the JSON file they gave me, it must have been 300,000 words. It was like War and Peace by Leo Tolstoy. And what digging into this on my own taught me, and my boss, is that we don't need this. Like, it's better to just get the material yourself. Now, the big thing now, we had to rewrite, I know this is boring, but it's Geekland, and this is my life, and I'm kind of like really excited about this. I realize tech writing doesn't excite very many people. We had to rewrite the NDA now because to do this properly, we're going to have to get the client's code repositories, which is their proprietary intellectual property, right? And people are loath to give this up. We'd rather just write the preparatory material for you. We don't mind putting the 100 hours in. And I'm like talking to these clients and going, well, you don't have to do that 100 hours of pre-preparation work to give me a package to write the shred claims. You can just give me access to your repositories. But people are terrified. It's like their intellectual property. They've invested 2, 3, 4, 5 years in these startup companies. They're $1 million in. They owe money, and they're always afraid that they're going to get ripped off. But anyways, that's my personal life. Now on to the podcast. Tonight I wanted to talk about gaslighting. And let's just look this up because we want to make sure. I find the etymology is important, and I hope you folks find this stuff as interesting as I do. What is the etymology and the definition of the term gaslighting? See what old Gemini has to say about this. Santo thinks I'm shaking hands with the devil, going deep into AI, but what does he know? He's 70 years old. He's old. The term gaslighting describes a form of psychological manipulation and emotional abuse where a person or group attempts to sow seeds of doubt in a targeted individual or group, making them question their own memory, perception, and sanity. Etymology of gaslighting. The term's etymology is rooted in a popular work of fiction. So the origin, the term comes from the 1938 British stage play Gaslight by Patrick Hamilton, which was later adapted into a 1944 Hollywood film starring Ingrid Bergman, also called Gaslight. The plot connection. In the story, a husband attempts to convince his wife she is mentally ill to control her and steal her inheritance. One of his methods involves secretly dimming the gas lights in their house and then vehemently denying that the light has changed when his wife notices it, insisting that she's imagining things. Isn't that interesting? Evolution. The chilling narrative resonated so deeply that the husband's manipulative tactic of systematically undermining his wife's reality entered the common vernacular, eventually being adopted by psychologists to describe the specific form of emotional abuse. Definition of gaslighting. Gaslighting is a deliberate pattern of psychological abuse aimed at making a person question their judgment, memory, and perception of reality, thereby creating dependence on the manipulator. Key characteristics and tactics of gaslighting include denial. The gaslighter denies an event or conversation ever took place, even when the victim has clear memory or proof. Minimization. The gaslighter downplays the victim's feelings or experience, often with phrases like, "you're overreacting," or "you're too sensitive." Countering. The manipulator questions the victim's memory, implying they remember things incorrectly. "You have a terrible memory." Blame shifting. The abuser shifts responsibility for their own harmful actions onto the victim, sometimes making the victim feel guilty for bringing up the issue. Isolation. The gaslighter may tell the victim that their friends or family agree that they are crazy or imagining things to isolate them and make them more dependent. The result of this persistent manipulation is that the victim often becomes confused, anxious, depressed, and loses their sense of self-worth, making them increasingly reliant on the abuser to define their reality. The provided video, okay. Oh, they got a little YouTube video here too. Isn't that interesting, the way Gemini in the browser just goes out and researches these things? So it's my theory in the podcast tonight that everything is gaslighting now. And I would say this is the modus operandi of governance now. It's always been there, but the intensity and deliberateness of it now is just absolutely outrageous. And I think this is part of a corollary plan that was initially built out by the COVID pandemic, in which there was a deliberate attempt to induce mass psychosis. And I think that they did induce mass psychosis with the lockdowns, with everything they did. Now, where I live, there was no real change in our lives or our habits, and so I would not say that I was turned more psychotic by the pandemic. However, I think a lot of people in the first world were. I think a lot of people in Canada were. And I think, quite frankly, Canada is probably the most pathetic, malleable, gutless, spineless country in the world. No offense to my Canadian listeners, and I know that I have many listeners in Canada. And I can't call it any other way. I mean, Canada, well, I mean, I should be a little bit careful what I say because I don't live there anymore. But I follow the news closely. And it just seems to be a complete and utter shithole now. And everybody's afraid to speak out. I mean, the very fact that, people are on social media supporting the policies of Mark Carney. You're either gaslit or you're stupid. And all of these people are educated. But education is not what it used to be. It used to be that a general, well-rounded education, I would say that in the first quarter of the 20th century, the people who graduated high school were better educated than most people who get a university undergraduate degree now. In basic literacy, basic foundations of math, civics, the Constitution. It's curious to me that the one thing that's not taught in school is money. And I don't mean economics, because economics is derivative of money. The pseudoscience of economics begins on the assumption that there's nothing wrong with the foundational system of fractional reserve banking and having the seed money in the central bank put in by loans from an outside source. which is a profoundly flawed system. So if your theory of economics, if all of your theories of economics begin on the assumption that that in and of itself is a sound practice, you're not going to come up with any sound theories for economic management, which is why the capital system is an endless series of bubbles and bursts. And the next bubble and burst cycle, I think, is going to be a little bit more severe. So I'm going to play something now, and I used to do this more in my podcast, use other people's material or short instructional videos to make a point. I've been doing a lot more narrative in my podcast and just allowing myself to speak, but this one is so well tuned that I think I'm going to play it and then commence and continue on with my my podcast on gaslighting.
A few nights ago, I was doing some late night reading on the financial system and the risks it might face, and I came across something I hadn't heard of before. A book. It's called The Great Taking. At first I thought it was just another alarmist take on the economy, the type, doomsday scenarios, conspiracies, the usual stuff. But something about it felt different. This wasn't some internet rant or unhinged blog post. The author, David Webb, isn't some random person on the internet. He's a guy who spent decades deep inside Wall Street managing billions, working with hedge funds, investment banks, even former Treasury secretaries. So he's been on the inside. And what he's saying, it's chilling. He claims there's been a quiet, calculated shift in our financial system over the last few decades. A legal structure set up that, if triggered, could allow all financial assets to be seized. I'm talking about your stocks, your bank deposits, your retirement accounts. The craziest part, according to Webb, it wouldn't be theft. It would be completely legal. Now, that sounds crazy, I know, but the more I dug into it, the more it started making sense, from how our assets are held, to the role of clearinghouses, to the language in the Uniform Commercial Code. It all lines up. And that got me thinking, what would it actually look like if this so-called great taking actually happened? Not in theory, not in some vague end time scenario, but in our real world right now. So I started sketching it out, how it could unfold, how it might be triggered, and what the average person might experience. What you're about to hear is a fictional story, but every element in it, the infrastructure, the laws, the loopholes, is based on real things that exist right now. It's a what if, but maybe not as far-fetched as it sounds. So buckle up. Here's how the great taking could actually happen. Imagine this. It's a Tuesday, just another day on Wall Street, but somewhere in the background, deep inside a back office that most people have never heard of, someone notices something weird. This guy, Bob, he works in IT for a large clearinghouse, one of those entities that sits between your broker and the actual market, the kind of place that handles trillions of dollars in trades but never makes the headlines. They're doing some routine maintenance on the system when Bob notices a dormant line of code buried deep in the settlement protocols. It's labeled something like Emergency Continuity Override. To him, that sounds unusual, so he digs a little deeper. Turns out this line of code is tied to a series of protocols that were added after 2008, updated during COVID, and quietly updated throughout their systems. The language is cold, clinical, talks about securitized obligations, systemic interruptions, and entitlement reallocation. What does that mean? It means if the financial system hits a certain threshold of stress, the kind that might trigger a liquidity crisis, your brokerage doesn't just freeze. Your assets can be legally reassigned. Think about that for a second. We've been trained to believe that when we buy stocks or hold cash in the bank, that money is ours. But the truth is, we don't really own it. Most financial assets today, stocks, ETFs, or even cash balances, aren't held in your name. They're held in something called street name, under the control of clearinghouses and custodians. You don't have a deed to your shares of Apple or your index fund. What you really have is a security entitlement, a kind of IOU that says you're entitled to the value, but not the actual asset. In an emergency, entitlements can be restructured, collateral can be reassigned, and the paperwork's fine print that you agreed to allows it. So here's the crazy part. Everything David Webb writes about in The Great Taking, all of it hinges on this legal distinction. And in this imagined scenario, the trigger has already been pulled. The system is now on a path that very few people understand and almost no one is prepared for. That's where it all begins, quietly in the background. No headlines, no sirens, just a line of dormant code waking up. Now, imagine a few weeks go by. Nothing seems out of the ordinary. Stocks are a little bit volatile, but they've been like that all year. The Fed's still giving press conferences. Unemployment numbers look decent, maybe a little off, but nothing major. But beneath the surface, something's brewing. The repo market starts to seize. Credit spreads widen. That's the gap between safe loans and risky ones, and it's getting worse by the day. A few large funds start dumping assets quietly. Nothing public, no panic, but the volume data tells a different story. The smart money is running for the exits. The media doesn't say much, just a few vague headlines. A little turbulence, some stress in the credit markets. But the real sign comes when a major institution, a multinational bank, suddenly halts withdrawals from its high-yield money market fund. The reason? Out of an abundance of caution. And that's when the professionals start to whisper. Is this it? You see, the financial system isn't built on money, it's built on trust. And once trust starts to crack, things go downhill fast. A few more headlines hit. A big pension fund rebalances defensively. A tech unicorn quietly lays off half its staff. A foreign central bank raises rates in a surprise move, and the dollar surges overnight. That surge, it's not a sign of strength. It's a scramble for liquidity. Suddenly, there's talk of coordinated global action. The Fed, the ECB, the Bank of Japan, they all hold emergency meetings, quiet at first, then public. But this time, instead of injecting liquidity, they pull the trigger on the plan that's been sitting quietly in the background for years. The one nobody understood, the one that wasn't about saving the system, but about resetting it. Emergency Asset Continuity Protocol activated. This is the moment where the Great Taking begins. It starts out slowly, quietly. Some people wake up and see longer than usual wait times on their banking apps. Others notice a missing balance in their brokerage account, just a blank line from where the numbers should be. Then a notice appears. Temporary maintenance. Please check back later. Most people don't panic, not at first. The language is subtle, such as we're enhancing security, temporary restrictions due to high transaction volume. But as the hours tick by, the messages change. Banks begin limiting withdrawals. Then they pause wire transfers. Then credit cards stop working for certain high-risk purchases. Your investment platform, locked. Your brokerage account, frozen. Your retirement account, it says something like under resolution review by an institutional custodian. The words sound official, but it all means one thing. You can't access your money. And now it's everywhere. The media is calling it a temporary stabilization event. The Fed chair steps up to the mic and says something like, "We've taken decisive action to ensure the continuity of financial markets and prevent further systematic contagion." But what he doesn't say is what really matters. That under this emergency protocol, assets held through clearinghouses, custodians, and brokerage platforms are no longer yours. Not because someone stole them, not because of a hack, but because the system was designed to allow this. You were never the legal owner to begin with. You were a beneficial claimant holding a placeholder. And in an emergency, that placeholder just got reassigned. Stocks pledged its collateral. Bonds reallocated to counterparties. Cash converted into CBDC credits, programmable, trackable, and limited in where and how you can spend them. There's no vote, no warning, just a statement that this is necessary to preserve order and protect the integrity of the system. And just like that, the great taking is no longer a theory. It's the new reality. By the time most people understand what happened, it's already done. Their wealth hasn't vanished, it's been absorbed. Legally, structurally, and quietly. After the lockdown comes the restructuring. The panic, it fades surprisingly fast. Not because people are okay, but because they have no choice. Within days, the Treasury, the Fed, and a few handpicked private firms roll out the solution. They call it the Federal Stability Credit. It's a central bank digital currency, a CBDC, and it's issued automatically to every citizen. Not cash, not a dollar you can hold. It's a programmable credit tied to your phone, your ID, and maybe your tax profile. It comes with limits though, where you can spend it and how fast you need to use it and what it can be used for. It can be paused, adjusted, or revoked. And the rollout, it's marketed as a lifeline. No more financial uncertainty, no more risk. Your money is safe because it's now part of the system. The message is clear. You'll own nothing, but don't worry. We'll make sure you have what you need. Soon, this becomes the new normal. Entire industries reorganize. Investment firms stop taking direct deposits. They now distribute entitlement credits through a national digital wallet. Small businesses apply for something called an allocation license to receive structured income. And traditional banks, they've been rolled into something called the National Collateral Management System. The stock market still exists. You just can't participate the way you used to. Ownership is now limited to accredited institutions, ones that pledge support during the collapse. Your 401k, it's been converted. Your home equity, re-indexed. Everything feels like it's still there, but the control, the access, that's all been rewritten. And here's the part that no one says out loud. It wasn't stolen. It was taken back by the system that always owned it. We just didn't know it until now. This is the new economy, not capitalist, not socialist, something else entirely. One where ownership is a privilege, not a right. And for most people, that privilege is gone. I know what you might be thinking. This sounds like science fiction. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Every single mechanism in that story already exists. The legal shift from ownership to entitlements, that happened years ago. The infrastructure for CBDCs, already being tested by central banks in over 100 countries. Emergency powers to seize or reassign collateral, they're baked into modern financial law. You just have to know where to look. And the trust we put in the system, it only lasts until it doesn't. Look, I'm not saying the Great Taking will unfold exactly like this or even happen for that matter, but I am saying that the author, David Webb, has raised some serious concerns. Concerns that deserve to be taken seriously. He's not a blogger, he's not a YouTuber, he's a Wall Street veteran who's seen behind the curtains. And what he's describing isn't a conspiracy, it's a structure that only becomes dangerous when the right crisis comes along. So maybe the story is fiction, but the systems behind it, the laws, the loopholes, the quiet shifts in language and control, those are all real. And if those systems were ever activated in a moment of crisis, would we even see it coming? You'll own nothing, and it won't be by choice. If this video made you pause, made you think, then I hope you'll help it reach others. Hit the like button and share it with
Well, there you go. I mean, there's a big bone to chew on for the rest of the podcast. And now I can reveal more completely why I titled the podcast Gaslighting. You see, over the last 10 years or so, certain people have been warning about a new structure coming in the world. As little as 7, 8 years ago, when directly asked about the World Economic Forum and its plans for a new global system, Justin Trudeau would habitually refer to it in press conferences as a conspiracy theory, all the while secretly participating with the WEF and its agents in pursuit of this new world order. We have this orange buffoon in the White House now, Donald Trump, and I'm going to begin to speak more and more negatively about him, even though I think I still stand by my assertion that he was the better choice in the last election in 2024. That a government comprised of the crazy pedophile from Minnesota as the vice president, and Kamala, I'll suck your cock for a quarter, Harris as president, it was a laughingstock administration. Now, this does not give an advantage to Trump and his team by much. My voting and my voting recommendations and endorsements are not predicated on any ideal vision of a future for America and the West, because America has habitually led the West, but rather a decision between the lesser of two evils, fully acknowledging that both choices are evil. So the Orange Man, he's doing this big dog and pony show, trying to convince people that the old America that he loved, which I guess he's talking about the 80s, that's when he made the most money, easily, and that's when he had the most pussy. Sorry to be gross or graphic, and I get a little shit off air from some people for, my gutter tongue sometimes, but I've been very honest about my life and who I am, so I can speak street credibly for a white guy anyways. But that America can't come back, and the reason is that the Uniform Commercial Code was changed. Now, and you got to understand what the Uniform Commercial Code is, okay? So once again, I'm going to go back to my good friend Gemini. What is the Universal Commercial Code, and how does it affect our lives? And what changes were made to it as documented in David Webb's book, The Great Taking? And how do those changes affect us? Now, this is a litmus test for AI. Now, I've caught AI lying about a lot of things, okay? So the Uniform Commercial Code, this is like, nobody ever thinks about this, but because the true legal system we exist in is Admiralty law, the Constitution of Admiralty law is the Uniform Commercial Code. Okay? And there's nowhere you can go to escape it, because every square meter of land in the continental United States, and even in the territories, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, what have you, every square meter of land is accounted for as an asset within the balance sheet of the Uniform Commercial Code, which is why building inspectors won't let you go and build a neo-primitive structure like a beautiful earthbag home, as I did in Costa Rica. They won't let you do it in the first world, and they're not protecting your safety. They're not protecting property prices, because most people who want to live this way are willing to go far away from the suburbs, the cities, and even the small towns. They're willing to go 10 miles outside the small town into a piece of abandoned forest or farmland and build houses you don't need an architectural degree to build. the kinds of houses people have been building since the beginning of time, but with modern techniques that make them much more durable, much more pleasant, electrified, and aesthetically pleasing. They won't let you do that because the land is part of the balance sheet in the Uniform Commercial Code. Okay? So the analogy I gave you is perfect. The real legal system you live in is the legal system of the legal person, sometimes called the straw man, and this person is created through the birth certificate, which has a fiduciary quality to it that is a little murky and still within the sphere of conspiracy. This is the aspect of the system they don't let the public know, which is your first clue you're not living in a democratic system, because the true nature of the governing law is not shared with the public. Okay? So how can it be a democracy? And to add insult to injury, you're held to the edict that ignorance of the law is no excuse, and they won't tell you the law. Gaslighting. You see where I'm going with this? And when that phrase came about, ignorance of the law is no excuse, they were talking about simple human law based on the human animal and a properly functioning human heart and a properly functioning human conscience, which gives us a proper sense of right or wrong. When they came up with the expression, ignorance of the law is no excuse, that's what they were referring to. You can't go and beat someone to death with an axe handle and say, I didn't know it was against the law to beat someone to death with an axe handle. The edict of ignorance of the law is no excuse comes into play because a normal human being would have natural internal prohibitions from doing that to another human being. Same thing with rape, same thing with theft, same thing with all of these things, okay? It's about living as a sovereign being, owning what you create, and even in a period of time before land titling existed, if you cultivated 10 acres with your 2 or 3 sons and 2 daughters, and you had a farming operation, and you put fences up, no reasonable person would encroach upon that, okay? There's a classic 1955 movie called Shane, the epic Western. In fact, you could almost make the claim that every action movie is a variation on Shane. Shane is so pivotal to the action genre. It starred Alan Ladd, and Jack Palance had an incredible role in it as well. And it's exactly what I'm talking about. Homesteaders set up farms in this beautiful valley. I get the sense it's somewhere in the interior like Montana or Wisconsin, and a cattle baron wants to run them off. And answering the prayers of these nearly defenseless farmers is Shane, a wandering gunfighter who wanders into the middle of all of this and takes out the principal gunfighter of the cattle baron and most of his henchmen in one gunfight. Beautiful movie if you haven't seen it, okay? But the way they use ignorance of the law as no excuse now is like this giant Chinese fishing net way outside the territorial waters that China can legitimately fish in. It's this, like in Canada alone, there's probably over 10 million lines of law in the various municipal, provincial, and federal statutes and acts. No sitting judge on the Supreme Court of Canada or the Supreme Court of the United States could pass a test asking questions about all the varied statutes in existence. If you were given an iPad and access to all the statutes and acts in the United States, and you had all 9 Supreme Court judges, you could stump them. So you could literally prove that the Supreme Court justices of the United States were governing the highest court in the land while possessing ignorance of the law. This is the system we live in, which is kind of why it's going to come to an end. But to go back and to repeat my fundamental allegory one more time, in the real legal system, the fiduciary system we live in, it's admiralty law and the equivalent of the Constitution and the Charter of Rights. The foundational law of admiralty law is the Uniform Commercial Code. And I believe, I'll check on Gemini after I get through the UCC stuff here, but I believe it applies to every country connected to the IMF system. Okay? So here we go. The Uniform Commercial Code is a comprehensive set of standardized state laws governing most commercial transactions in the United States. It's not a federal law, but a set of model laws adopted by every state, though sometimes with minor variations. The District of Columbia and U.S. territories. Isn't that interesting that Washington District of Columbia exempts itself from certain UCC codes? Very interesting. And same thing with Delaware is another one. This is why all the politicals and the Nancy Pelosi's and Joe Biden's, they open up corporations in Delaware because there are special tax laws in Delaware. It's kind of like a Panama Papers right in the middle of the United States, and they all use it. And these are the same people who write tax law so that the poor slob working a factory line job at Ford or GM building trucks has his deducted at source. But these people don't even pay capital gains taxes because it all sits in a special trust inside Delaware. So one set of laws for them and another set of laws for us. Democracy has been non-existent, I'd say, since 1972, when Nixon took us off the gold standard. And yes, I'm fully aware of the fact that I keep going back to that. But if you think about it long enough, if you contemplate it long enough, there was an epic moment of pivot in 1972 when Nixon did that, okay? And this is the foreshadowing of the system we're coming into now. They've been planning this for decades. Ergo, they've been gaslighting us. They've known exactly where we're going. Donald Trump's, both of his presidential campaigns were nothing but gaslighting. Okay? How can the United States go back to the way it was with this new Uniform Commercial Code? It can't. But let's get back into it. How the UCC affects our lives. The UCC brings uniformity and predictability to business law across state lines, which makes commerce more efficient and less costly. It affects daily life by standardizing sales. Article 2 governs the sales of goods, not real estate or services, setting rules for contract formation, warranties, and remedies for breach of contract. Regulating banking. Article 3 and 4 cover negotiable instruments like checks and promissory notes, and bank deposits and collections, streamlining how routine transactions are processed. Securing loans, Article 9, governs secured transactions, which is when a loan is secured by personal property collateral. This is relevant when you finance a vehicle or when a business uses its assets to secure a loan. When you see a bank holding the title to your car until the loan is paid, that's often governed by the UCC. Investment securities. Article 8 provides the legal framework for holding and transferring investment securities through intermediaries like brokers. Now, here we get to the good part. Alleged changes documented in The Great Taking. David Webb's The Great Taking puts forth a controversial theory asserting that changes to the UCC, particularly Article 8, investment in securities, have been implemented to allow for a mass taking of investors' financial assets in the event of a systemic financial collapse. Webb's central claims regarding changes to the UCC are often summarized as, okay, Let's just stop for a moment here. We're dealing with Gemini here. The Uniform Commercial Code is available for it to go and access online in its totality. No redacted or hidden content. It's completely online. Why did Gemini not do this? Okay, so this is me talking back to Santo. I'm not being corrupted by AI, Santo. I use it where it's productive. So a bulldozer is better to clear land than to manually clear it with 10 men with spades and rakes over 2 months when you can do it in 2 afternoons with a bulldozer. That's the proper utility of AI. This is the bullshit. And I've caught 3 or 4 things now that it's just outrageous. For one thing, even the World Jewish Council openly admitted in the 90s that the true number of deaths of Jews in the alleged Holocaust was no more than 2 million and probably 1.5 million. The Red Cross and the Catholic Church records have the deaths at 272,000, and most of the people died of diseases related to depleted immune systems by malnutrition, and only because Germany was under embargo, and even the citizens of Germany were equally affected. Okay? But Gemini consistently presents the numbers as 6 million. Okay? And so the worrying thing, just like the analogy I gave about how I find AI beneficial, okay? As I begin to merge it with my trade of technical writing and grant writing, but I openly acknowledge that if you were just coming out of a master's degree in, I don't know, computer science, and you wanted to be a technical writer, let's say you in your undergraduate degree, you also took many courses in rhetoric, writing, and literature, and you learned how to write and communicate properly, and you wanted to combine the technical knowledge you got in your master's degree and pursue a profession as a technical writer. If you started using AI out of the gate, you would never fully learn the trade. Just like people who lay out magazines and newspapers on computers now could not go back to a layout table, a ratio wheel, and a pica ruler and a scalpel for cutting the size of pictures. And that's how newspapers used to be laid out. There was a ratio wheel, so it would tell you how big the picture was going to be, and there was a pica ruler. One pica is 1/12 of an inch. Okay? And that's how they laid out newspapers, because the cardinal rule in newspaper was no white space. And if you sold advertising, and by the time all your stories fit into the newspaper with the pictures, you told your client, the advertising department in 1965, told its client, let's say a fur coat salesman or a watch salesman in Times Square, they were promised a quarter page. Well, they have to size, so to get that quarter page, they might have to shrink a picture that's related to a news story. That was all done by ratio wheels. It's a manual thing. It's like a sailor's compass. I actually used these things in 1988 in journalism school. I learned how to lay out newspapers and magazines the old-fashioned way. So when I go and use these layout tools and these typesetting tools, like if you've read my books, any one of my books, everybody says the same thing. They're beautifully typeset because I learned typesetting in university. You cannot put something into Microsoft Word and call it proper typesetting. Any trained eye will see right away it's complete crap. A lot of trade talk in this podcast. Have you noticed how much I've spoken about my work and my trade? But anyways. So, why is Gemini not just going and checking Section 8 of the Uniform Commercial Code? And why would David Webb take the time to write this book, cut ties with probably most of his hedge fund friends in New York? And that's quite a life. You get to go to the best dinner parties. You get the best seats at the opera and at the symphony and on Broadway. That's the high flyer life. And this guy out of nowhere is just going to throw a giant fuck you at that whole world? No, he did it because it was a matter of conscience. So this is part of the inversion we live in. Wait for it. Gemini is actually gaslighting David Webb. Okay? AI is going to begin gaslighting people. That's what it's going to do. Okay? So, Webb's central claims regarding changes to the UCC are often summarized as shift in ownership. He claims that the current legal framework, especially in UCC Article 8, Part 5, fundamentally changed the nature of property rights and securities. Instead of having direct ownership of securities held in brokerage or custody accounts, investors are reduced to being entitlement holders or general creditors of the securities intermediary, e.g., the broker or custodian. But Gemini doesn't affirm this by actually correlating it to the source material, the Uniform Commercial Code, okay, of which it could probably find instances of the commercial code going back 12, 20, 30 versions, because they're constantly making little changes and updates to it, right? And when you publish legal documents, they generally publish, you can generally access the same statute or act or code for the last 50 years in its various. This is exactly the kind of thing AI should be very good at doing, but somehow Gemini doesn't want to do it. Now, let me tell you why I'm certain David Webb is telling the truth. Number one, as a footnote, I was raised by an economist. I was raised in a money family. I am the only male in my family not to go into the money business. My brother he's retired now, he was a chartered financial analyst, which is the highest designation you can get in the financial world. It's one of the hardest accreditations to get. The failure rate over 3 levels of testing is 65% at every level. Okay? It's more esteemed than a master's in business administration. It's as esteemed or more esteemed than a chartered accountant. Any kind of brokerage license to sell securities or stocks, it is like the highest status in the financial world. Okay? So I come from a money family. Now this is how it went. If the dates are right, okay? So this would have happened probably sometime around just after the last debacle with the housing mortgages in 2008. And international creditors would have gotten together with U.S. regulators and said, well, we don't think the U.S. should be allowed to borrow any money or to have a AAA borrower's rating anymore, credit rating. Based on this, how can you assuage our fears? And the United States would come back with, how about if we collateralized the assets of our citizens? Now, if you think this is crazy talk, you don't understand how this financial world operates at all. That's exactly what they would do to extend the credit and to get out of that 2008 crisis, which should have been much more severe than it was. So I'm almost convinced that's what they did. So for international lenders and international foreign central banks and foreign lenders to have security and confidence in the American economy after 2008 would have had to re-collateralize. It's like getting your loan called in on a mortgage because you missed 2 or 3 payments, and they say, okay, well, we're going to shut down your house and sell it, and you come back and you say, well, my brothers will also put up his farm as collateral. And the bank goes, okay, with the farm as collateral, we'll let these 3 missed payments go. But if you miss 3 more payments, we take back the home and the farm. That's what happened. So you don't really own anything anymore. They're entitlements, not deeds, exactly like that brilliant Asian man said in that short 14-minute video. Okay? So it's fascinating to think about these things because, and here we come back to the concept of gaslighting. You got Donald Trump making this big stand and saying, we're never going to go with this globalist agenda. This is nonsense. Although he's never directly attacked the WEF. Whenever he talks about globalists, he never mentions the WEF. Okay? But the fact is, if you're American and something equal has happened in Canada and Australia and Britain, those countries, my country and those other countries, and New Zealand and probably France and all the other countries, the only difference between those countries and the United States is those countries didn't have the corollary of a David Webb to say, hey, this happened. This is the new financial reality. Okay? But if this global concept of owning nothing is going to come about, how else would they do it? And the reason I say that we're being gaslit is we're all stoked to fight this, and it's already happened. And our politicians and financial leaders, the governor of the Bank of the governor of the Bank of Canada, Bank of England, the chairman of the U.S. Fed, all of these fucks on Wall Street, Larry Fink, the fucking goof, Jamie Dimon from Goldman Sachs, they all know this is in place. They all know they have access to all of our property to collateralize federal spending. Okay? Now, it gets even worse when you think it through more thoroughly. These idiot liberal politicians like Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi and AOC and Ilhan Omar, they're throwing all these money at people who ostensibly, and I don't mean to be too cruel to the downtrodden, but I myself have lived on the streets, and I know the path out of living on the street. They don't want to take the path. And you know why? It's too damn hard. That's why. They don't want to do it. They're lazy. They're drug addicts. They want to hit the bong all day. You know, play video games and smoke the bong. The government's going to pay me to be American. As this excessive liberal spending has been going on, beguiling the perception of anybody who understands money, keep in mind that this is at the risk of the hardworking people who've bought their homes and own their stuff losing that to pay for this. This is how interactive the financial system is. This is how holistic the financial system is. It's like a giant lifeboat and we're all on it. If 100 people at the front left decide to stand up at the same time and they tip the boat, everybody goes in the water, even the people who had the prudence to stay sitting. You really can't take anybody serious as a politician if they don't understand money and finance. And 99 out of 100 politicians now have no concept of money and finance. They sell themselves on, if they come from areas where people want to take, like, and I'll use Omar in Minnesota, the illegal refugee from Somalia who married her brother to get citizenship, she should be deported. She committed a crime to get her citizenship. She's now sitting in the House of, in the Congress of the United States. How is it racist to say that out loud? She should be stripped of her citizenship and chucked back to Somalia. Okay? She goes and sells to her base, I'm going to get more money out of the federal treasury for you. Well, how is that responsible or equitable to the entire economic, holistic American economy? It isn't. But here's the kicker. She herself doesn't even understand what I just explained to you. She's that stupid. It's not that she's immoral. She is immoral, but she's just that stupid. We have an epidemic of stupidity in politics now. It's epidemic. Okay. So, secured creditor priority. The book highlights provisions in Article 8, such as UCC 8-511, which he argues grant priority to a secured creditor of the securities intermediary over the claims of entitlement holders, the investors, to the financial asset, provided the secured creditor has control. Webb alleges this priority means that in the event of a major financial intermediary collapse, the largest banks and financial institutions, which act as secured creditors, could legally seize the assets held in clients' accounts, leaving individual investors destitute. Here's another way to look at this, okay? And this is another reason I believe this. This whole system of taking away the wealth of the first world has been creeping up around us for 2 decades now, okay? And it doesn't matter who's in office, whether it's a conservative government or a liberal government. The bail-in legislation was so contentious in Canada that probably the most conservative leader we've had in 50 or even 75 years, Stephen Harper, an evangelical Christian who believes Jews are God's chosen people, but a brilliant economist at the same time, he could not get the bail-in legislation mandated by the IMF after the Cyprus event in 2014. If you're not financially literate, don't worry about it. Just keep going with the podcast. But those of you who are financially literate, you know what I'm referring to with the Cyprus event. After that event, all IMF partner countries were strongly pressured to write and pass bail-in legislation. So bail-in legislation is exactly what David Webb is talking about in his book, The Great Taking, principally the same thing. But bail-in legislation only applies to your savings account that has $50,000, $100,000 in it. Under bail-in legislation, in a financial emergency, the bank can seize that money. Okay? Now, what Webb is telling us in The Great Taking is it's not just the money. It's your 401k. It's your investment portfolio. It's the deed on your house. It's everything. Everything. Okay? Point 3. Engineered collapse. Webb's theory posits that these legal changes were deliberately engineered and quietly put in place globally to be used during an eventual planned financial collapse to facilitate a massive wealth transfer. Now, why would Gemini have any doubt about this? Gemini and its algorithms have access to all of the information I have footnoted in tonight's podcast, and yet it's still wavering. Okay? I don't know what it is about these AIs. I see these videos on YouTube of people asking ChatGPT the weirdest shit and, doing this whole, if you can't say yes, say yellow. To fool the algorithm, and having these incredible revealing conversations with ChatGPT. Gemini is probably one of the more conservative AIs out there. And why wouldn't it be? It's controlled by Google. I continue to pay for it and use it because it's absolutely phenomenal in the work I do. Okay? But that's the only reason. So, what I'm talking about tonight is the perpetual gaslighting that's been going on for I don't even know how long now. They're all lying to us. And if, the unifying moment we're going to have is when the left and the right realize, yeah, these fuckers on the left completely lied to us. And then the right realizes these fuckers completely lied to us too. And we come back together and we take our countries back. And they know this moment is coming. And this is why they're pushing the massive amounts of immigrants into first world, original G7 countries. Okay, even the Africans are pouring in even to Japan now. Okay, it's a huge thing in Japan now. Okay. And this is why they're doing it, in my humble opinion. I'm just a podcaster. You can take everything I say as an op-ed, not as a news story, but as an opinion, an op-ed piece, an opinion editorial piece. Okay? But if you think about it, it all just goes together like a Russian doll, doesn't it? So, oh, we're never going to go with this. Justin Trudeau saying, well, WEF and a one world government and you'll own nothing. That's just a conspiracy. He was saying that 6, 7 years ago, knowing full well what he was doing. Okay? So in democratic societies now, the bank foisted leaders we get, their job is to lie to us. Okay? Now, Trump, what's Trump doing? Well, as I said, he has a divine affliction upon him. He is showering the American people with the truth because the truth just seems to come out around him. Not through his mouth, but just through the cacophony of circumstances that he churns up like muddy water. Okay? And that's another aspect of him that I find, very interesting and very engaging. Now, we're being gaslit in every way, you know? Being gaslit on Palestine. And don't get me wrong here, okay? When I say something about Palestine, I'm not ignorant of the fact that the Arabic world uses them as a human sacrifice to foist some ham-fisted, lazy Sabbath Sharia law war or holy war against Israel that they're half-heartedly involved in and that they would never commit their own sons to. The Qataris, the United Arab Emirates, Dubai, Saudi. It's a shit show, okay? From the perspective of the average people on both sides, the average good, God-fearing, God-loving Israeli who studies the Torah, the good people, it's just a shit show. These people are the ultimate pawns on the planet now. Okay, but we're being totally gaslit about that. I've been telling you, you've been gaslit about that for 5 years now, 6 years. It's all about the temple, and I've gone over and over and over the temple. I don't want to do it again tonight. Okay, go back and watch Temple Whores and Noahide Law, because I just nail it in that podcast. Anyways, I'm going to title obviously this podcast "Gaslighting." I'm Bruce McDonald, and this has been the Talamanca Review.